It's got to go. Go. No, it's not time for love. Go. 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 You will be editing all of this, right? I used to think that I was a stupid, I was an idiot, I was worthless, I was hypocrite, a liar, and I was at some point of my life a pathological liar because I wanted to be better than what I was inside. My name is Ruth, and I live in USA. I never found myself with any value. I never found myself with any beauty. I found myself useless and never with any desire of life. But because of society, I have to fake it until I make it. So I pushed through while inside I was just rotten and empty and just like with a deep black hole in me.
The regular way of approaching self-esteem is I compare myself with someone else because I cannot do the same things as others, or I cannot be as intelligent or as smart or as beauty as other people are.
You put yourself under a certain pressure. I have to be here.
Many people say, my mother used to tell me when I was young, oh, you are stupid, you are useless, you don't know how to do things. And this made my self-esteem to remain low.
And we want to have that value given by others.
I was always seeking for that validation. I didn't want to be like that, but I was always gravitating to that. It became like an addiction. Mama. I grew up longing love, especially for my father, because I grew up in a broken home. That would be one of the biggest things that I think affected my identity. Since I grew up with a lack, with a void, I started seeking for that love in the wrong places. Nobody knew the hell that it was inside of me because I knew how to cover it very well.
Getting your wing whacking going, huh? Getting really good.
My mother, I consider she was a functional person that was facing depression. And in Dominican Republic, that is not a treatment that is people care about or will focus on. But she dealt with a lot of issues that I understand now because she has to raise 4 children on her own and not having the financial resources. She depended on doing things that also marked me in a negative connotation. My mother was tough, and I always was trying to measure up that strong personality, and I wasn't that tough. I always was the little kind of weak and feeble child. Even though I was in an age that I already have children and able to make my own decisions, I did not make my own decisions. I always needed my mother to make those decisions for me or her approval. That was something that affected the relationships that I had. because if they didn't measure to my mom's likeness, I will not continue a relation with them. It affected me a lot in my personal level because the relationship of which I have 2 children, my mother and my brother were not in approval. So I was pouring that unhappiness to this individual while he was trying to be in a relationship with me and the children that we had. So eventually that also became toxic because I am just pouring out a lot of bad. And the insatisfaction of my mom and my brother, which were my world. I used to drink a lot. And it was, with my mother. But I was just lost in a circle, in an environment that I hated, but I didn't know how to get out.
So in humanity, we do have a problem, and we see this problem significantly played out, especially in the context of relationships. And that problem is that we take for ourselves a source that needs the same things that we need. And so if I go to another human as my source, that's a problem, but that's what we all do. You're born and you take mommy as your source, and you take daddy as your source, and you take your siblings as your source, and you take your teacher as your source, and you take people around you as your source, and you're always taking other people as your source. You're taking the explanations that you give, you take their facial expressions, and you learn and you pattern after other individuals. And what they say, you take and you believe, and it becomes a part of your worldview, and it builds your worldview. And so how you see the world has a lot to do with who's around you, what did they say, the information that you took from them, and that then impacts how you view everything.
And because we gather value from these sources, as long as I'm performing well, I think that I have good esteem. And if I'm not performing well, now I don't have good esteem. My self-esteem is low. And these are the results that come from having people as our source rather than having God as our source.
The reason of why me and him separated, that was something that it was very, very painful. Like I said, my mom was a big influence of not liking him. So when she learned about the reason that took place, it was a joy for her because I'm finally breaking up with my partner, the father of my children. So I couldn't reconcile with that joy. I couldn't tell my mother that I was dying inside, that I really wanted to stay, because she will not be sympathetic to that. She was happy that I was finally breaking up. So that series of emotions led me to say, I don't worth anything. I'm just better off dead. If I was gone, maybe the girls can have a better opportunity to not deal with the wretched mother that I consider myself. So that was what led me to the first time that I tried to take my life. I took pills in my mother's living room, and I did it with the purpose to be found dead there. So I just stayed there and was waiting for whatever would happen. But thank God I was able to just be tired and with a sick stomach, but nothing major. After my separation with my partner, we had an arrangement. He will pick up the girls on his weekends, And on the weekends that I didn't have the girls, I was just doing me. And I was doing me dangerously. I was dating, I was clubbing, I was drinking. I became very, very addicted to be in relationships because during those years I was just dating a lot. So I found that as a cope strategy when in reality was something that it was destroying me.
You treat something according to the value you think that it has. So if you think that you have little value, then you can put anything in you. You can watch anything, you can eat anything, you can drink anything. It doesn't matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter how corrupting it is. It doesn't matter how degrading it is. But if you have tremendous value, you can't just put anything in you. You can only put in you what is worth the value that you are. And so you must select from the things that you eat, the things that you drink, the things that you see, the things that you participate in, so that it is according to your value.
Through that cycle of life, I also experienced abuse by different interactions that I have with men. And that was my second time that I tried to take my life. Then I met someone when I turned 35 online, and he was just a new believer, but with a very dangerous past. We got married, and many of the things that he was dealing with came about. And one of the things that he did was just not just to me, but to my daughters. So that was one of the changes of life that I was not prepared to face. But I recognized that because of the mindset that I had at the time, I couldn't have nothing better than what I had. I was as damaged as the person that I was gravitating to. It was very tough and painful 6 years that I was hoping to support and to keep the marriage. We had really good moments, but in the end, it was just another toxic relationship. But not just because the person was toxic, it was because I realized that I was toxic too. There was so much pain, suffering, anger, and damage in me that I didn't have the ability to choose wisely.
So, how am I going to know whether my worldview is a correct worldview or not? I need something that is not dependent upon what I believe, not dependent upon what I think, not dependent really upon my perceptions to a degree. Now, what could that be? Well, I believe that that is what I would call the fundamental law of nature. And the fundamental law of nature is that everything takes in order to give. We see in nature that everything, it passes on the power, it passes on material, it passes on resources, and so on, and it does something with that. And so everything, every component in nature takes in order to give and takes in order to give. And it doesn't matter if it's a living organism or if it's a non-living entity or whatever, even a rock. A rock will take of the sunlight, it will take of the warmth, and and then the lizard that lives under the rock gets to be shaded, and not so hot during the day. And then during the nighttime, the rock is giving off the heat, right, into the environment so that the little lizard underneath the rock doesn't freeze at night. And so even an inanimate object like a rock is taking and giving. Everything in nature is taking and giving. It's taking and giving. So, does my worldview fit with taking and giving, or does it fit with giving in order to receive? Right? How am I operating? Do I think that I'm loving others with my love? Do I think that I'm respecting others with my respect? Do I think that I am caring for others with my care? Or do I recognize that I cannot give any respect or honor or care unless I first take the respect, honor, and care, and that the respect, honor, and care that I give is not mine? It didn't come from me. It came from something else, from somewhere else.
My daughters have always been good girls, and they knew how to support each other to go through the crisis, and they did a great job supporting each other. But it came to a point that they needed out too, and they seek that way out. Since me and their dad were separated, their dad was the way out. They found me guilty to the fact that I choose to marry this person, aware of what I knew of his past. And I believe that's okay. I can take responsibility for my choices. I cannot take responsibility for somebody else's action. But as a parent that needed to protect them and keep them safe, I didn't do a good job. At the time of separation with my ex-husband, the environment was very tense. And because I was going through my own crisis too, with dealing with guiltiness, bitterness, anger, and also wrestling to survive to all the changes, I was lashing out too. And I was abusing my mother's authority over them, getting loud, doing whatever my emotions were available to do to place that authority. We created a more tense and toxic environment for the three of us as we were transitioning through this. As a result, they both left, and I ended up alone at the new home, and that's when I experienced another switch and life changing, where I realized that my daughters were my idol. And even though I didn't have the best way to manage my emotions through the crisis, because I have been with them for so long, part of that identity was plugged into them. And I found myself lost. And I went into depression. I didn't want to live. I was hearing voices in my head and outside my head. I got to a point that I was answering back the voices that were in my mind. I was going crazy.
And so therefore, if somebody takes that respect, honor, and care and they reject it and they push it away or they won't accept it or whatever, then I'm rejected and I'm pushed away. And now I have a significant problem, a significant difficulty, because now I'm in conflict with others and I see them as in conflict with me, and relationships are chaotic and they're falling apart and so on and so forth. If there's dysfunction that keeps following me in my life, whether that's in my body, whether that's in my relationships, whether that's in other aspects of my life, and so I need to question what I have believed is true. And now I need to compare it against something like the fundamental law to see, okay, does it fit? Does it not fit? If it fits, great. If it doesn't fit, time to reevaluate.
When a mother feels that their children hate her is the most excruciating pain. It feels like you've been stabbed multiple times in the heart. The inability to handle and understand rejection. Culture gets in the way, and what others will say and think. So it becomes an avalanche of things that comes from the outside to the inside that the individual that is going through it cannot process correctly. I love my daughters, but I didn't know how to love them. Because of love, I was in pain when they left. Because of love, I couldn't understand. But it wasn't a love that was healthy. It was a love that it was, I need you guys. Stay with me. I want you guys. So did I really love them? Today I know that I didn't. I loved them in a selfish way. And I believe that I have authority over them, that they are mine by reason because I carry them in my wound.
And what are some signs that show that I have other people as my source or another person as my source? If I find myself needing them to be a certain way in order for me to be a certain way, then I can be sure that I have them as my source. I get upset at them. I feel controlled by them. I feel the need to somehow control their behavior or how, what they say, what they do, and so on. I feel elated by what they say. If they are up and happy, I'm up and happy. If they're down and depressed, I'm down and depressed. So if I have other people as my source, I'm surely going to end up empty, depleted. So I need a source that has all of those things that I need constantly, fully, personally, and unselfishly. And it cannot be another human because every human being needs those things and needs them that way.
As a mother, I'm giving myself merits of what I have done. Not understanding that that was my responsibility. I choose to have them. They don't owe me anything. But I see them as they own me. So with a very sick mind, I had an excruciating pain that I couldn't bear. So when they left, I was gone. I went back again to be without identity. I was missing a love that can be pure, constant, unconditional, filled, wanted, valued. And since I was familiar with the ability to take my life in the past, I said, okay. I was considering. But this time I did something that I didn't do the last 2 times. I prayed. And I asked God to come in and help me because I knew that I couldn't get myself out. The change came when I started to know a different God. And when I recognized that the scriptures have the power to do what they said they will do. The changes came when I got sick and tired to fake. When I got tired to wear a mask. And when I recognized that I didn't have no strength in my own to get myself out of the situation that I was. My change came when I started looking to myself, inside of me. And I was scared of who I had become. And seeing the changes and the progression of my life, I saw myself as a monster, and I didn't like it.
What makes something valuable? Is it the material out of which it is built? A stamp, for example, is made out of a simple piece of paper, which is not very expensive in itself. What defines the value of the element itself is what price is someone willing to pay for this element. A simple piece of paper, a stamp, many people do not know the value of that stamp, and they would not pay more than $2 or $3 for this stamp. But another person that knows the value of that stamp will be willing to pay $1,000 for a simple piece of paper for a stamp, because that person knows the value. So in the end, the value is defined by what price is someone willing to pay for that.
And when I recognize how vast the universe is and how expansive it is in time and space and power, and you think that, wow, God is bigger than all of that, He's more powerful than all of that, He created all of that, He sustains all of that, and yet He came to this planet and He became one of us, and He went through torture and pain and misunderstanding and abuse and all of that kind of stuff so that He could save me. Then I recognize that there is tremendous value there. I might not see it personally, but there's tremendous value there.
So my value as an individual does not come from what I am made out of, from my capacities, what I am capable of doing or what I am not capable of doing, but my value as an individual comes out of the price that Jesus Christ was willing to pay for me. That is a very high price.
Yes, we need value, but the value is how we think about others. That makes us happy. What we can know about ourselves is, and the highest level that can any human being achieve is to be a child of God.
My trust needs to move from what mother and father said when I was young. I move my trust to what God says. My Creator, my God says, I have paid the price of the life of Jesus Christ for you. And now you can believe this information instead of the information your parents gave you. And how much low self-esteem will you have if you know that God Himself paid the price for you?
The most difficult part was the surrendering and being in a position where there is nothing on the other side. There is nothing that I can do, and everything that I have done shows by history that I am really good doing things wrong on my own. And there is this way that is appeal and good, and it seems that it has a way out, but it is too hard to even comprehend. I couldn't understand how just by trusting God would it be possible. I just couldn't trust Him. I was dealing with images in my head for an addiction that I didn't have victory over. As I'm trying to have victory over these pictures, there was one morning as I started talking and remembering and going back and going back. One of the things that fascinated me the most was that I was able to see Christ in my life in the past. And then as I start seeing me today, that I'm getting out and I start feeling better, the fact that He always knew, that He knew everything, that He knew that I will go through every single thing that I went through, that knew all my secrets, even my thoughts, that has witnessed my wretched, wicked life, and I still was able to say, I will die for you, and is still interceding for me. And it's still telling me in his word, I have loved thee with an everlasting love. And with loving kindness I have drawn thee. I was blown away when I read Ezekiel 16 verse 8 that says, when I pass by thee and look upon thee, behold, the time was the time of love. And I spread my skirt over thee and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I made a covenant with thee, says the Lord God, and thou becamest mine. That was my why moment. That I recognized I was being loved for all my years, even when I was certain and secure that nobody loves me. And when I needed that love, as perfect, pure, unconditional, constant, holy, that I can look back and say, he was there, just being that loving Savior, definitely changing the manifestation of his love for me, but nevertheless always loving me. So when I understood that, I couldn't stop crying. Not so much because of me, but because I was in awe that a Savior like that can look at me. That he is able. That he always cared. And because I was playing the harlot, and because I was doing whatever I wanted to do with my life outside of him, and claiming that I had an identity, he waited. Never put any pressure. And at the time that I reached out, he said, here I am. And he grabbed my hand and he hugged me with his love. And he did not let me go. And I know there are people who say, but if God is true and God is real, why all these things happened? In my life, my choice is what was happening. Christ didn't want me to go through the things that I went through. He was suffering right there for me, with me. That's why he was there. But he couldn't take me away from the choices that I was making. And for my way to see life backwards until I recognize my own condition. Back then, my spiritual condition was leading me to a lot of illnesses in terms of overweight, acne. I had yeast infections. I had rash. My emotional state, my mental health was very unstable. I was very unstable. As I learned, then from the last crisis that I had, I was experiencing abdominal problems. My stomach used to beat, like shake, shake, shake and beat. I was crying every day. My sleep was gone. The lifestyle that I was practicing, it was not effective to take me away from the trials without affecting me physically. At some point, I started experiencing like a little bit of noise in my ears, like a ringing. There just was so many. There were times I had headaches, cramps, body aches, back pain. I was diagnosed with that years when I was working at a condition called costochondritis, which is an inflammation of my chest, breast here. And that inflammation will cause so much pain that I felt I was having a heart attack. and it was just my upper muscles inflamed. I had such a bad episode years ago that I ended up in the hospital. But I carried that pain like that, and then sometimes it feels like somebody was stabbing me in the back. My physical manifestations started to improve when I started to surrender and giving it all to Christ, to Jesus. How I did that, it was not a feeling. I confessed and I believe that He has forgiven me. And I choose by believing that I was forgiven.
In my particular case, I found it easier to forgive others than to forgive myself. I found that it was easier to let go what others said and did to me at the cross than it was for me to let go what I said and did to others at the cross. As I was struggling to accept God's forgiveness for me, for the things that I had done and the mistakes that I had made and so on, one of the thoughts that I had in that time, and I believe God was trying to communicate with me, and that thought was, Mark, if I died to set you free, what right do you have to hold yourself captive? And that one really hit me hard. And I thought, oh, yeah. Because if He died in order for me to be forgiven, who am I to hold on to the captivity and say, no, you can't set me free? I have no right.
The effect of feeling forgiven was good, and I felt that right away. But in time, that's when I started noticing that those things that was tormenting me was not tormenting me anymore. And as I started seeing that, then my stomach stopped the beating. My body aches started to decrease. Headaches. The more that I continue establishing that connection, and as I remember, I repent, I go to Christ, I pray, and if I needed to confess to somebody that I did that, do that. There were things that I remember in my past that I needed to reach out to the individuals that I did that and tell them I did this without finding no excuse for myself, calling my wrong as it was, and seeking for forgiveness because I understood forgiveness was for me. So the effect of doing the right thing, the right way, according to what God tells us. If I confess my sins, He is faithful and just to forgive my sins and to cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Now, some of my relationships has been restored. One of them is with my mother. After 11 years, we are finally able to connect and to have a very harmonious relationship. I established a relationship with my dad, and it has been the best experience that I ever had. I relate to my daughters more now than before because I know they belong to God, and I can trust God with them. So I don't have to worry nor carry any pain for the current separation. I believe God has everything in control because He knows the end of the beginning and He knows what is best. And I trust Him with them, so I am free of taking upon me any worry, any concerns. I have God as my source. I don't take responsibility for what others say and do. I recognize that they are responding to God. I like the picture of having Christ always before me. So when people say things to me that could be unpleasant, I don't get offended. I feel protected. I feel loved and cared by him. I like more the fact that I can take responsibility, even of the things that I do wrong, and not see myself as the worst person in the world, but see me as someone that is in a work in progress. And that work in progress is only manifested by the challenges that comes in. It's amazing to receive some of the things that in the past will drive me nuts or will put me in a position that, whether as a anger or sadness or crying or just down, to say, okay, it's here. I can go in prayer and say, I feel this way. I'm going through this, and I understand that by reason you are my source. And then those beautiful Bible verses come in, and those promises. And as I read them, or as I come to mind, then that peace rests in my heart. So there's no reason to go into a dark path anymore.
When I recognize that I am a child of the King of the universe, the Creator God of all that there is, when I recognize that I am precious in His sight, when I recognize that He was willing to sacrifice His eternity for me, when I see the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, when I see the pain and the suffering that He was willing to go through for me, if I was the only one. And when I take into consideration eternity, that God is intending to be with me forever, and that in forever I have forever to learn, to grow, to understand, to know, to do, and so on. I mean, just take what somebody can accomplish in 80 years' time or 70 years' time, and now multiply that by forever. How much are you going to accomplish throughout all of eternity? It's just mind-blowing. You can't even conceive of how much you can accomplish throughout all of eternity. God knew what He was paying for. He knew how much we were worth, and He paid what the price deserved. And in that, we can understand our value.
Today, I am someone that can connect with multiple women because my life has the same lives, stories that they had. But I can offer something better because the heart always goes after gain. So I found my game and I am not letting go.